Yo, what is up guys? Boy here. Am I the only one who is a little bit concerned with Andy Ruiz's mindset going into this Anthony Joshua rematch, or potential Anthony Joshua rematch, I should say? To me, he seems to be coming across as a bit of a one-hit wonder. He's dining out on that first win over Anthony Joshua a little bit too much. Ultimately, it was a great win, but, he shouldn't be resting on his laurels. He should be really building on that win and then building a legacy. I get the fact when he first won he was celebrating, he was getting himself out there, fair enough. But we are in the middle of June now. Time to move on and get on with your career, starting with that Anthony Joshua rematch. Obviously, we've been told this dude signed a rematch clause against Joshua, so that's the fight we expect next, but for whatever reason, he's being extremely difficult and he's being troublesome in the negotiations. Listen, I get the fact that you are trying to negotiate a bigger purse, but if you've signed a contract, you've signed a contract. Ultimately, it depends how you've been raised, but you should be a man of your word ultimately. So that's how I see that. But his whole mindset going into this rematch or potential rematch is a little bit concerning. It's like he's milking his current fame and it's almost like he's trying to cash out. And to me, for whatever reason, he doesn't come across as confident leading into this rematch, despite him destroying Anthony Joshua in the first fight. And listen, I've not really got a dog in this fight. I don't really care who wins. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I've still got to pay my bills. My life goes on as normal. I don't care who wins, but I've not been impressed by Andy Ruiz's attitude. Is this guy going to turn into another Buster Douglas? Now, Buster Douglas back in the day, before he fought Mike Tyson, he was a guy who was seen as a talented fighter, a guy with a brilliant jab, a good boxer puncher, a guy with solid skills, but he never really put it together and he always sold himself short leading up to that fight. The Tyson fight. The perfect example is his fight with Tony Tucker. Now, he was boxing really well in that fight for the vacant IBF heavyweight title, but, in the 10th round, he got stopped in that fight again, showing glimpses of what he could do, but ultimately he came up short. But against Mike Tyson, he put it all together and got the biggest win of his career, and then, he was on top of the world. But, after that Tyson win, he got gassed. He got gassed on the fame. He got gassed on the money. He put on a load of weight. He didn't take it seriously. And following that fight, he got destroyed by Evander Holyfield in 3 rounds. And basically, his career was over after that point. To me, that should be a lesson to Andy Ruiz. Ultimately, it's down to Andy Ruiz. What does this guy want? Is he content on what he's achieved? He can call himself a heavyweight champion. He's earned a boatload of money from both fights. Is that enough for him? Is he content with that? If so, fair enough. But if he wants to continue to be a heavyweight champion and he really wants to continue to build a legacy for himself, then I think he needs to buck his ideas up and get to work. He needs to get back in the ring with Joshua, take care of Joshua, and then go from there if he really believes in himself and he really believes he's the real deal. Because after the Joshua fight, providing he wins, he's 1 fight away from being an undisputed heavyweight champion. Technically he's 2 fights away from being an undisputed heavyweight champion, but he's not convinced me he wants that. He's not convinced me that he wants to be a great fighter or he wants to cement a great legacy. It's almost like he's content with what he's achieved. I could be wrong. I could be reading into it in the wrong way. I could be totally wrong. I could be interpreting things wrong. All I'm saying is this guy doesn't really convince me right now. I really want to see this guy in the ring again, and I want to see how he progresses from this point. Ultimately, I'm a boxing fan. I'm really interested in Andy Ruiz right now, but he needs to stop the nonsense. Ultimately, if we believe what we are told, he signed a contract that, included a rematch, and that included the financial stipulations of a said rematch. So if the guy did sign that, he should really be a man of his word and fulfill that rematch and then go from there, you know? He beat Joshua in good fashion. He beat him decisively. There was no questions. So do it again and then move on with your career and create a real legacy. There's a chance you could go down as the best heavyweight of your era. Like I said, you're 2 fights away from being an undisputed heavyweight champion. That should be enough motivation in itself, as far as I'm concerned. And listen, I'm not saying Andy Ruiz will be the next Buster Douglas. I'm just asking the question. And I'm certainly not saying his downfall will be as rapid as Buster Douglas's. Like I said, I'm merely asking the question. Listen, you know, this is just based on what I've seen from Andy Ruiz since the first fight. I've not really been convinced by his mentality. Having said that, I'm also not sold on Joshua's mentality since the first fight either. I made a mention of that in my video a few days ago in regards to the location of this rematch. That was before it got announced in Saudi Arabia. So listen, I'm not picking on Andy Ruiz. I'm just sharing my thoughts on his behaviour since that first fight. And listen, that's why this rematch is actually really interesting. There's so many subplots. There's so many things to consider. Was the first fight a fluke? Is Joshua damaged? You know, is Andy Ruiz taking things lightly now? There's a lot of things to consider. I really want to see the rematch, despite the first fight being one-sided. Share your thoughts below. How do you feel about this video? Peace.